Without question, the surprise of the Singapore Grand Prix weekend was Mercedes with their competitiveness around the Marina Bay circuit. It was out of the blue and not something anyone expected. So, how did they actually go about getting pole position and a race victory last weekend? Well, it lies in their upgrade package for the event. They were one of only 2 teams to bring upgrades for the weekend alongside Red Bull, and within their upgrades they had a new front wing. But specifically, there is a hidden aspect to their newly upgraded front wing, which is the key element for their newfound competitiveness, and it also may pay dividends later in all of the remaining races. So what is that hidden aspect of the front wing upgrade which has made such a huge difference for Mercedes? Well, if you cast your mind back at, I believe, the midway point of the season, there was a technical regulation update to regards to how you create front wings, specifically the levels of flex from them. That very much hampered Mercedes after it was enforced. Now, if we looked at a before and after of this technical regulation change for 2025, there is a stark contrast to be had. You see, before the rule change in Barcelona, George Russell was on the podium 50% of the time in the first 8 races. But you see, while he may have won 1 race in Canada, he only stood on the podium a further 2 times before we headed to Singapore. So that is a drop in performance quite clearly to see. And that is why the upgrade package that they brought to Singapore with a new front wing and a hidden design feature within it is vitally important moving forwards. You see, along with Red Bull, Mercedes were the only team that brought upgrades to Singapore. They've introduced a new front wing spec with visible changes in the top flap, together with substantial but also hidden changes in terms of materials used to construct it. Now, looking at the design itself, the top flap presented a different flap design with a more curvy trend compared to previous specifications and an even more pronounced chord in the central portion. This produces more downforce, and as well as that, of course, with the introduction of what is not visibly seen, the hidden aspect, which is the change in material used. Now, as we all know, carbon fiber is used for the majority of an F1 car's components. It's lightweight, highly elastic, and resilient all at once. Now, during this season, before the technical change in Barcelona, Mercedes as well as McLaren were one of the most flexible front wings on the entire grid. And after that rule change, the front wings no longer flex as much. Now, since then, Mercedes have been back at base, of course, using different types of carbon fiber. It's basically they're looking to find a new composite mixture that would allow greater flexing while remaining stiff enough to pass the FIA static tests successfully. And of course, the results of that work now comes to fruition in Singapore. And this is why it's so important, this hidden aspect, this hidden upgrade within the front wing that they said in the documents. It offers greater flexibility without compromising resilience, and it enables them to fine-tune the balance between low speed, medium speed and high speed around a variety of circuits, not only in Singapore, but moving forwards. And it seems Mercedes' continuous efforts to experiment with the composites and materials they use to make front wings has now paid dividends. They've got what looks to be a competitive edge, once again making a step forward in the Singapore weekend, being in line with the speed comparatively with regards to Red Bull and McLaren, leaving Ferrari well back in the distance as the 4th quickest team now. So what does this all mean for the rest of the season? Of course, as I've said, it's a small sample size that we have. 1 race weekend with the newly introduced front wing, with changes and revisions to the upper elements and the chords, and of course a new material used to design and manufacture it. We're going to have to wait and see at upcoming race weekends such as Mexico, Austin next time out, if I'm not mistaken. We have Brazil and of course Qatar, to name but a few. Varying degrees of circuits with different speed ranges of corners across the board, which will require differing setups from what they've had in Singapore, for example. And this will very much test out and stress whether this new front wing is utilizing the new materials in a way through which the team with Kimi Antonelli and George Russell are able to extract more performance out of their car, as we saw this past weekend. So Mercedes, I would say, now look to be in a place where it's going to be a tussle if they can get things right on a weekend in terms of setup, to be fighting the likes of McLaren and Red Bull for those top positions. Slightly wrong in their calculations in terms of setup, and they will be a little bit behind the pecking order with regards to that. But if they get it spot on, like they did this past weekend, as we all saw and were very much surprised by, Mercedes are in the ballpark to hunt. And all it takes is quite simply this: one off weekend from McLaren or Red Bull in combination with one another, Mercedes to ace their setup, and they then have an everlasting advantage for that weekend. And of course, with upcoming events having multiple sprint race Grand Prix weekends, the time through which teams are able to maximize and improve the setup is going to be that much more smaller, because of course sprint weekends introduce one practice session straight into qualifying, followed by sprint race and main qualifying. Of course, they still have all of those events within Friday and Saturday through which to run their tests, as teams generally do on a sprint weekend. And if things aren't going the way they want with the setup they initially run with, by the end of sprint qualifying, if they haven't crashed out of it, the sprint race, they have enough data to see where they went wrong and the changes they need to make in regards to main qualifying and the main race on Sunday. So with that all being said, Mercedes seem to have taken a step quite clearly in Singapore from where they've been in recent times with regards to their competitiveness. And it's going to be an interesting time ahead to see just how competitive they will be and whether they can hit the sweet spot in terms of their setups moving forward.